For too many years, families of children with devastating illnesses have felt helpless as they watch their child suffer. Today, they're taking matters into their own hands and finally finding relief treating their child with cannabis. These are their stories.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode.
Hello. So
Tonight
excited.
Yes, we have a special guest today. Her name is Mieko Hester-Perez, and she's part of the Global Healthcare and Autism Advocate for CannabisSafe Analytics Lab. She's also the Senior Cannabis Policy Advisor, Pereira Biosciences, and she's the president of CA Corporate and Attorney Services. Guys, bear with me. This young lady is it in the West Coast because she does so much. She's also the director of product development for MD Exclusive CBD. She's a board member of the California Aquatic Therapy and Wellness Center, the board member of a Chalkin Social, and she's also the honorary board member for the Puerto Rican Society of Cannabis and Science and Medicine. And not to mention, she's the board member of Normal Women's Alliance.
Wow.
My God, I had to breathe in between us. But thank you, and thank you for joining us, Mieko. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I want to meet Mieko now.
Yeah, right?
Right? Oh, right before you start, we have a little disclaimer. We have another guest here.
Just in case you hear him chime in.
Hear a little voice chiming in.
Is Aiden, the man, the myth, the legend, the reason why we're here. So, Mieko, I mean, just based on what you've done, just what I read off, I also know that I didn't get a chance to touch on the fact that, you know, what brought you to this point was because of your son and him having autism. Could you please share your story with us that led you to this path where you are now, today?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. It's almost like, okay, 11 years later, where do I begin?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Yeah.
From the beginning, as we would say.
From the beginning. Joey was diagnosed with anorexia and malnutrition second to his autism in 2009. During that time, he was 9 years old and 42 pounds. So not only was I watching him just kind of wither away, so was his entire medical team. And so I remember him being cleared for a dentist appointment. And so in which, because of the severity of his autism, he had to be sedated. And so because of that, I did have a doctor that okayed this procedure to go through. Mind you, he's 9 years old and 42 pounds, and you can see the bones in his chest. And so after that appointment, I left thinking, and I remember looking in my back seat saying, this just doesn't sit well with me. Mm. And so I went home. I've been a legal secretary for over 25 years, and my son just ended up being one of my biggest cases. I remember walking through the door, and at the time I was married, and my husband was a stoner. Or he wasn't a stoner. He indulged. He was very proficient in cannabis.
Okay.
And so by the time, my goal was just to get some meat on his bones. And so I bust through this door, through our front door, and I started talking about Cheech and Chong. And from that conversation, I think I spent the last or several days researching and stumbled upon a paper that Dr. Bernard Rimland had wrote. And it was on medical marijuana, a valuable treatment option for persons on the spectrum. And so I had also found some information that Dr. Lester Greenspoon had written. So basically, I put together this file to present to his medical staff, his medical team. And I remember leaving that appointment thinking, oh my God, what's next? Mm-hmm. And in 2009, the industry was not as vast and with regulation and licensing. And so we were here in California, we were under Prop 215. And Prop 215, was for patients. And, it's one of the blessings of being in California. And I was able to reach out and work with some wonderful cultivators. I like to call them Joey's uncles. Joey has quite a few uncles all over the world, but I was actually able to get a crash course in the cannabis industry starting in 2009.
Wow.
And I think 3 months after successfully treating Joey with cannabis, I was asked to go on Good Morning America. And it's now 2020, and here I am.
That's amazing. How did you come across with Good Morning America? Because that's pretty mainstream for something like that. And it's not something where we're accustomed to seeing a woman of color to be on a national television channel presenting, autism, one. Secondly, using cannabis to treat.
This is true. There is a TV station, or ABC or KABC here in Los Angeles. There was a producer who reached out to me. I still think that was divine intervention. Not sure how she found me, but it took me 5 months to accept, 5 months to say yes.
Oh, really?
After seeing my son transform. Not only was he gaining weight, he was also open to direction. He was just having a much better quality of life.
Wow.
And by that time, being in the legal space or being in the legal industry, I knew, okay, I need to talk to my attorney. We need to figure this out. And from 2009 to almost today, I've been on every major network, including Fox News, in which my understanding and how I was able to be successful and having a very healthy conversation on the Fox News channel was pro-life. Cannabis is pro-life. I was raised pro-life. And if cannabis meant keeping my child alive, then I'm doing what I was taught. And I was doing what my grandparents had instilled in me, and that was my faith. And so cannabis wasn't such a bad idea on Fox News Channel that day.
Wow. That's amazing.
I'm glad you said that day. Yeah.
Yes, that day, because you never know.
That day. And because of such, it was, it was an amazing door that we had opened. And we had opened that door not only here, but in Australia, Latin America. We were on Univision and Telemundo and 20 NBC, ABC, The Doctor's Show. It was, and I had a medical team that supported me and was right by my side when my attorney was not. So there was kind of a recipe to being successful, and the recipe was having a medical team to support a decision, really to honor pro-life, honor life, honor the reason why you became a medical professional, and that is to preserve lives.
Really? That's interesting. How were you able to assemble a team? Because I hear you saying my medical team, because it's not something that, when we were going through our situation,
we couldn't really get anyone fully on board, really.
We didn't get into like a team. It was just us, in that sense, because we were still trying to figure out, what was wrong with our son. Once we were able to get him on the medical marijuana,
then we found a cannabis doctor when we wanted to really tweak, like the dose,
the medical farming, farming.
I think it was the dynamics. I didn't come into this industry by myself. I came in the industry with a few physicians and my attorneys.
Wow.
There's only one way you can enter or one way that you could have only entered this space and have been successful in 2009. And that is with a team. Now, to date, do I still preach the same message? Yes.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, and even when we do our podcast, we always tell people just to get a medical cannabis doctor.
Yeah, to help you,
guide you, to be there, to be like, I'm doing this, with guidance of a medical professional.
Yeah. Well,
I think that is great, and I think, but there's also a lack of guidance when it comes to children on the spectrum specifically.
You're right. So the ones that we went to, they were more for epilepsy. You're absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's a different arena.
It's a different arena.
Yeah,
and
it's a much different arena. And in 2000, when Joey was diagnosed with autism, that was pretty traumatic for me as a mother. But I mean, we stayed fast and we kept it moving. And I just knew that I wasn't going to lose my son on my watch.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I'm going to find enough research to be able to support this decision. Are you guys with me? I'm doing it no matter what, but are you with me?
Yes.
And they agreed that it was the most appropriate treatment option for him at the time. And so it was either watch my son pass away, or you guys get on board and honor your medical licenses and why you became a medical professional. And obviously it wasn't that harsh, but I was extremely and to this day still very grateful for the medical professionals who stepped up. Now, I am not a cannabis consumer. Never. I've had to be very responsible at a very early age. I've been, working for attorneys since I was 18 years old. So, and I come from a fairly conservative. Well,
conservative.
We're very conservative. We're in a Southern California in Orange County. And I come from a long line of ministers.
Oh, wow.
And so ministers and law enforcement.
Oh my
That's
God.
my back. That's my background.
Oh my God. This was like taboo.
Yeah.
You would completely disagree.
I remember drafting an email to my family saying, you know who I am. And this is what my grandparents had instilled in me. And that is the fight for my children.
Yes.
And that is to preserve life and to lean on my faith.
Wow.
And so because of that, everything that was being thrown at me, I could catch. And then I also had an amazing set of physicians and an amazing attorney who made sure that nothing ever touched Joey and I.
Attention Cannabis Podcast listeners. You can now listen to your favorite cannabis podcast ad-free with the MJBulls mobile app. Just download the free MJBulls mobile app to your smartphone to start enjoying cannabis podcasts with no commercials. Go to Apple Apps or Google Play to get the MJBulls Cannabis Podcast app today.
Wow,
it's a lot to take in.
A lot to take in, the story itself. And so in terms of for the listeners, like you said, you did a lot of research. How did you find this research in 2009? How did you find
Exactly?
Yeah, that's what
I had to go to the books. I had to walk into a library and start going through books.
Wow.
That's
2009.
crazy.
Yeah.
There was some research that was available, but it wasn't. I knew that the medical doctors were not going to go, okay, Mieko, you just printed this out and put it together. No, I actually had to pick up the phone and call Dr. Lester Greenspoon. I had to call, where is Bernard Rimland now? I'd realized he had passed away in 2006. But I this became one of my biggest cases in which I had to put together a Bible of knowledge and a Bible of support to support keeping my son alive.
Wow. So for you, your main objective was to increase his appetite.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's where I thought, and so going back, I had to, and obviously autism was a new term. You know, autism in 2000, in the 90s, autism meant you were an idiot savant. It did not mean,
unfortunately, yes,
the autism condition that it is today. So I had to rethink and dig deep into brain trauma in order to find the information that I needed to support protecting the brain.
So it wasn't necessarily autism. Titles didn't necessarily say autism, but they said brain trauma or, like brain like a damage or something. Oh, and which makes sense. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense to you and I, but not necessarily. Everything was just so new. Everything. Joey was diagnosed with autism in 2001.
Wow. Okay.
So it was a very everything was new, including the cannabis landscape was new, and so because of that, I ended up working with Ed Rosenthal, Jorge Cervantes, the
pioneers,
DNA genetics, and it was. And they knew how much of a straight, and I was just like the nerd who popped up. I didn't know much about the industry. I'm not a consumer, but I knew what happened to my son. And then I could make sense. I remember sitting in a room with Dr. Robert Melamede, and he was a cannabis science professor out of Colorado Springs. And I listened to his lecture one day, and of course, it was science. Okay, I don't consider myself a huge science buff, so I was listening to him speak, and after his lecture, I said, I understood everything, so let's sit down so you can understand the other side. And so it just, for me, that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed being around some of the pioneers in this industry, probably more than they could have even imagined. Because of DNA genetics, our story was at Copenhagen, Denmark, pharmaceutical conference, and our faces were on the screen.
Wow.
So we were transiting, and we were actually, as we continued to go mainstream, there was a certain obligation that I felt that, there were a lot of catch-22s. Not every state had a medical marijuana conditions in which families could utilize. And so, as the industry progressed, in 2011, my son was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Oh, wow. Which is the terminal muscular dystrophy. And I remember sitting in a room when I got the diagnosis at a round table with about 8 crying physicians.
You said crying?
Crying. Oh, and I looked at all of them and I said, what are you crying for? And they said, your son has given so much to the autism community and so much to us. And I said, well, that's what he's here for. You guys don't need to cry. And I had to be the adult in the room with crying physicians who knew who Joey was.
That's amazing.
And so, yeah, it's and I sat in that room alone. And I drove home alone.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. What was your family's involvement in your time with Joey and everything else? Like, how supportive were they in helping you with this transition? Because, you go from basic caregiver to like everything.
What family?
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Which is a common story with 99.9% of the families that I speak with all across the world. Once our children are diagnosed with autism,
It's almost like
we as children, as parents, we make sacrifices, and one of those sacrifices is sometimes we have to stay home, sometimes we have to miss holidays, sometimes we can't go, sometimes we're never on time, sometimes, and they don't understand.
Yeah, we had that experience. You can't go out to certain dinner events, family events. I mean, I remember one time that Aiden had a seizure in front of my family, and they just jumped back as if someone attacked him or something was wrong. It's like, what was that? What's wrong with him? Is he all right? It's like, it was a seizure. Just relax. And it was almost to a point where they were in fear or disgust, and I couldn't tell what it was. And part of me was kind of ashamed. I'm like, you know what? I can't be around my family with my son going through this. It's just like, it wasn't the reaction you expected, but I also understand that it's not something they're accustomed as well.
Exactly.
So they don't know how to cope or deal. And,
Right.
And one of the things that, they always say, hey, you want a gift? We'll send him a gift. I'm like, no, spend time with him. Let him get to know you. Sending a gift is easy.
Exactly. It was so funny. So we, in terms of, we didn't really go out without Aiden very much, but if we did have someone to take care of him or babysit him when we went out, a wedding or an event, they just had to be not afraid of his seizures.
Yeah.
That was the whole criteria.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and not like, be on eggshells.
Yeah.
It would just be like, all right, like my brother, like he would just take care, because my brother, he wasn't scared of him. And, so that's what it was. And it's hard to find even family members
who could understand
that.
Or even have a little bit of compassion.
Yeah, exactly. And like little things, because kids with autism and anytime they need structure, right? So they have to go to bed at a certain time. And in our culture, the kids stay up late.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's...
Yeah, right?
Yeah, or late or not at all.
Yeah, right? Let them run wild, especially boys.
Yeah, so they're up late. You'll have a family event, and they say they're going to start at 5. It doesn't start until 11. So you're like,
can't make it.
We can't go.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, if he goes to
rest.
bed at 12 or midnight, it throws him off and triggers seizures. But I don't think they quite could understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent many years by myself. Wow. And it's a very common story. And I was just grateful that my grandparents had given me everything I needed to always lean on my faith. And that's exactly what has gotten me probably to this day.
Yeah, definitely.
When Joey passed away in 2018, and it's only been a few years, but Joey and I had an understanding.
Yeah.
And that understanding is the reason why I have not left my post. We still have one more goal to achieve. I wasn't expecting him to get a letter from, President Obama. I wasn't expecting for him to ever say anything other than Mom. Joey taught me gratitude. He also taught me not to take advantage of what we have. I remember coming through the door and I would say, oh my God, Joey, we got this. And, he didn't care. All he wanted was his cup of juice.
Yeah. He wanted his mom.
Yeah. That type of training that he gave me has allowed for me to be speaking with you today.
That's amazing.
And now I know where I belong. I'm a healthcare ambassador. Even though I work in the cannabis space, and even though I have some very well-valued relationships that I could just pick up the phone and say, hey, I just have a question, and they'll answer. And I am beyond grateful for where I am and where I've been. It hasn't been easy, not one time ever. Like it has been a constant, fight. But at the end of my day, I would come home and look at Joey and say, oh, it was worth it.
Yeah. That is true.
It was worth it. I had, to strong arm his, everyone in his IEP meeting today. And then I could just laugh. And I think that's what I mostly miss right now, is not being able to come home and say, Joey, we did it. But I think he still hears me when I tell him that, because he played such an intricate part in the person you see today. And that is, my job is to come in and protect families as a healthcare ambassador.
Wow. For our part 2, I would love to have you come back on and for us to continue this conversation, because a certain sense, I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what, as families, we go through, and looking for that support and looking to help our families and help us, in a way, because this is not easy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say goodnight. Thank you for checking in. Get ready for part 2, because, we're going in. Okay? Thanks for listening.